people with real jobs.
Hello?
Self-employed people. Which do you want to be? This is Certifiably Unemployable. It's time to fire the boss and become self-employed. Maybe you need a push to get that business or side gig going that you've been dreaming about for years. And if you're an entrepreneur, you can listen to stories and get experience from people who've done it. Get ready to change your life. Broadcasting from the compound, this is Certifiably Unemployable, and this is Sean Dean.
Welcome to Certifiably Unemployable. I'm your host, Sean Dean, and thank you for being a part of the show. Don't forget to connect with us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and YouTube. You can also find us on many podcast platforms, including iTunes, Spotify, and Anchor. So are you ready to fire your boss? Are you ready to start your own business and finally be self-employed? Well, that's what Certifiably Unemployable is all about. Maybe you have that concept that's been brewing in your brain for months, maybe years, maybe a lifetime. And maybe you just need something to push you along the way. Maybe you just need that nudge. And that's what Certifiably Unemployable is all about. So we encourage you just to take a few moments to yourself, and maybe as you're listening to today's podcast, you'll get a nugget. You'll get something that is going to help you, move forward, and it can be your spring into a new career and finally getting a chance to be certifiably unemployable. You'll understand what that's all about, and being self-employed. So, one of the things that we hear all the time when it comes to being an entrepreneur, and I think my guest for this week's show can really agree to that, is that we always have something that could possibly be holding us back. Maybe it's a resource, maybe it's a belief, maybe it's lack of knowledge. A lot of times it's fear, So that brings us to our show this week, and we are actually really excited about this show because I've actually known this individual since 2009. His name is Hugh Benjamin. Hugh Benjamin's out of the Los Angeles, California area. He's been building startup companies his entire career. He has a proven track record of growing companies from 2 employees to 200 using his unique brand of high-energy, responsible scaling strategies. Now, in the past, under Hugh's direction, he's taken startups to be listed on the fastest-growing private companies by Inc. magazine, along with these companies being voted top 20 places to work in Los Angeles. Hugh is currently running a business we call I Think an Idea for SEO, digital marketing strategies, reputation, and brand management in Los Angeles, California. I'm going to be honest with you, Hugh, when it comes to SEO, which is search engine optimization, PPC, pay-per-clicks, all I know is what the acronym stands for and nothing more. So we're going to go ahead and let Hugh tell you a little bit more about himself, and then we're going to go ahead and get into this week's topic. How you doing, Hugh?
I'm doing great. Thanks so much for having me on the show today. We've known each other for a while, and when you told me that we're doing this show on Certifiably Unemployable, I said, wow, what a great opportunity to share some insights with people. I really love making a difference, for people, even within my business with digital marketing. I work with a lot of CEOs and owners of companies. And even in internet marketing, there's like a certain belief level where people they're kind of doubting it. They're kind of afraid, they're spending this money. And to me, it's almost like being a magician. And I like that side of life when I can move, touch, and inspire people to live to a greater extent, or maybe dream some dreams that they can create a reality from. And so hopefully today I give you guys a lot of value on this, and feel free to ask me anything you want. If you guys are watching today, make sure you guys post your comments down below. I mean, the great thing is, when I charge businesses that are doing $700, $800, $900 million a year, a lot of times I'm charging these people $300 to $500 an hour. And so I invite you guys to participate, post down below on the link, and send your questions in too. So if you see this video and you have a question, reach out to Sean or reach out to myself, because, we can't really make a difference if you guys don't ask a question. And that's really important because you can have a lot of ideas and you can want to accomplish things in life, but you've got to take the steps to participate and to really go out there and be your own best enthusiast for whatever you're doing.
Right. And Hugh, that's a huge point because, today we're mainly talking about marketing. We're talking about essentially how you started something from absolutely nothing. And, but with the category of marketing, there are so many things to talk about. And so, like Hugh said, if you're watching this on YouTube, you're watching this on Facebook, you're just listening to the podcast through one of the podcast services, send us a message. The best way to communicate with us really by messenger is probably on Facebook. And so message us, because this is not going to be the only episode that Hugh is going to be a part of, because a big part of Certifiably Unemployable and what really impacts us as veteran entrepreneurs is understanding the content that other entrepreneurs need, and especially the people that are looking to get started. So, all right. So Hugh, let's get going. So so when you say you started your business literally from nothing, right? When you have nothing and you started, maybe give me a little backside on that. When did you first become self-employed? What forced you to start your own business? Tell us about that.
Yeah. So, something really crazy happened to me. And, sometimes in life, things happen to us and we all have a choice on which way to go when those things happen, because things happen to all of us, right? I was working in the food and restaurant industry since I was 15 years old. I started as a busboy at a private country club. I used to experience some of these amazing president's balls where people drove up in limousines and Ferraris. And here I am, 15 years old. I make $3.35 an hour, right? And I'm like, oh my God, a Ferrari, awesome. Right?
Yeah.
And it was so funny because the general manager of this country club in Pennsylvania, he came to me and he sat me down and I was like, what did I do? And he pulled me aside and he said, what, Hugh, you can't work like 30 hours overtime. So at age 15 and 16, I was working 70, 80 hours a week because they offered it to me and I would just keep saying yes because I wanted to make more money. And he said, you can't do that. Like, you have to try to stay within 40 hours. So what happened to me was when I was age 20 after the Marines, I got out of the Marines and I decided to buy a franchise. And that franchise was, it was a student painters franchise. And at the age of 20, I was like, hey, I could paint some houses. And they had a whole system. They had training for sales. They had, how do you estimate a house? How do you identify like a need with the customer? And it was really good training. I mean, I'm 20 years old. I've never been in business before, but I learned how to do payroll. I learned how to hire people. I learned not to hire people that I know and my friends, Right. So, because at the end of the day, here I am painting a house all by myself, right? I'm like, get rid of everyone. I'm like, okay, you can't do it the right way. It's my business. I'm going to have to do it myself. So I think if it's going to be, I had this phrase, like, if it's going to be, it's up to me. Like, I got to get it done at the end of the day, no matter what happens. And I painted, like, I think I booked, like, for a couple months, I booked $50,000 worth of house painting. I worked on, in my community where I grew up, is a famous company called the Asplunts. They have tree trimmers. And I actually worked painting their homes. And the lady, Emily Aspunt, actually helped me get into college for a second, because after the Marines, when I went into college, I was more into socializing and having a good time. I was like, I can't sit in class. Like, I've got to be doing something productive. And I was in the restaurant industry working at Cheesecake Factory in Beverly Hills, and I started getting pains in my wrists from tendonitis. And I'm like, oh my God, what am I going to do? Because for 10 years, my experience was only food. It was busboy, waiter, was serving people. And I said to myself, what am I going to do? Because for 10 years, that's all I knew, right? So I worked at Italian restaurants. I worked at fine dining. And they said, well, you can't continue waitering because your wrists have tendonitis. And I said, what do I do? So I went to a friend of mine here in LA. I was 24, 25 years old when that happened, which kind of shocked me because here I am, like, I'm pretty young. I played 5 sports, but maybe just carrying a lot of heavy dishes, right? It just kind of got got to my wrists. The Cheesecake Factory has huge portions, right? So I go to my friend and I go, what am I going to do? And he said, he did some parties on the weekend for kids where he did magic tricks and he was a clown. And I was like, this is crazy. Like, I'm going to be a clown. And he goes, yeah, you just do a couple stupid little magic tricks. And so talk about nothing. Like, I had no costume. I had no training. I just was backed into a corner where I had to come up with something new. And I went and I got myself a balloon book. I learned how to twist balloons. I got a little tricycle that was sitting in the yard, and I put my knees up on the tricycle. I had my girlfriend at the time sew me a clown outfit, and I got a wig. And I was so terrified. I was like, I'm going to ruin this little kid's party, right? So I go and I do this party, and I made like $85 for an hour. And I was like, wow, that's a lot more than as a waiter in a restaurant, like working a shift all day and doing side work and all that stuff and making $100 or $150. So I was like, wow. But I was terrified. And I was like, I'm going to ruin this little kid's party. And the party wasn't that bad. We all beat ourselves up and we're always afraid that we're going to do a bad job. But it turned out really good. And then I did another party. Next thing you know, this is going to be kind of funny for the people listening. But here I am in big cartoon character costumes, making $150, $200 an hour. And at the time, my girlfriend, who is now my wife, she said, I didn't even know that clowns made money, right? So I'm making $3, $4, $5 on the weekend in cash in my 20s.
Nothing
and
wrong
I
with
started
that.
training other people because I said, well, I can't do all the parties. And I had people calling me from Malibu and Los Angeles and all these places from referrals. And I said, listen, I can't do your party unless you pay me like a lot more per hour because there's only one of me to go around. And I was forced to have to train other people to do what I did. They didn't do it as well, but I was able to expand. And at one point we were doing 40, 50 parties a weekend. I'm 25, 26, making about 100, 150K a year. Next thing you know, I'm doing parties for Will Smith and Magic Johnson and the Wayans brothers. And I found something called the internet. I put up this crappy website that was in Microsoft front page, and it was like the worst thing you've ever seen. Next thing you know, I'm getting calls from Blockbuster. Blockbuster was my biggest client that I initially got from the internet. And now because of the internet, Blockbuster doesn't even exist, right? So Things changed for everybody, right? I got calls from Guess Jeans, and then I had my own event planning company. I started another one on the East Coast. And during that time, one of the things that I want to talk to people about that are watching this, there were so many opinions from people that I knew saying, well, I don't know, that's like too much work. You're going to start a company. Why don't you just go get a job? Or I went to start a company on the East Coast, and my family said, well, I don't think it's going to work here in Pennsylvania. It's different than California. So I set up the ads, and I did all the same stuff in Pennsylvania, and the phone was ringing off the hook. We're talking 40, 50 calls a day. And my brother and his girlfriend at the time would just stare at the phone and go, oh my God, this is working, right? And nobody thought it would work, right? So I had to have that inner belief and that trust to say to myself, you know what? It doesn't matter what people think. I know what is possible. And I laid out money. I bought costumes. I created, a structure for the business. And today, my brother's business is still running. We're talking like 20 years later, and they're doing events for big corporations. I'm not in event planning anymore. I transitioned into marketing, business consulting. I was in the travel industry, and now I have my own digital marketing agency after growing a whole bunch of other companies, from 2 employees to 100. I've done it over and over, so I understand the chemistry of what makes a business successful. And if you're someone looking at this and you're trying to start your own thing and you're trying to be self-employed, I think the biggest challenge that people have is like whether they believe it or not. Like I had a guy call me last year, a millionaire in the real estate industry, wanted to start his own like news station, conservative news. And he said, hey, I want to get 1 million emails and I want to get 1 million people to my website. Well, for some people, they can't get their head around 1 million. So we had to kind of break it apart. But the one thing I was going to share is no matter how much money you spend or what you do with the actions, it's a believe it or not principle. And what I mean by that is if you believe it so much that it's in you, that it's an intention, and you consistently do it, then magic is going to happen, and you're going to make money. You're going to run into people and go, oh my gosh, I can't believe I met this person. Or you're going to bump into someone walking down the hall, and next thing you know, you have a customer or you have a client. And it's your mindset, which I think your mind is like a magnet, right? So if you think you're going to attract business and you're positive and you believe it, then it happens. And sometimes it doesn't happen in the first month. I mean, I know people that put up a podcast and they just did it and did it and did it. And 2 years later, now they're making six figures on sponsorships. But if someone prejudged it in the first 30 days or the first 60 days or the first 90 days, most people don't have the stick-to-itiveness to keep doing it anyway because they love it. And if you can just keep doing it anyway, eventually the money is going to catch up. Mm-hmm. And now the other side of that is fear, right? It's the same thing as if I get a client, whether they're paying me, $1,000 a month or $20,000 a month. If they have a fear that it's not going to work, it usually impacts how we work with them too, because they're calling us every day, 2-3 times a day, and they're in a way almost beating us up going, is it going to work? Is it going to work? Is it going to work? And instead of us
because since they have the fear, they doubt you,
right,
because it's 100% about them at that point.
Yeah, it's 100% about them. And I find that the ones that relax and let us just do what we do and have faith and trust it, then it works.
Right.
But if you're always looking for the hole, where something's going to run out, you can always find a hole, and you can also always find opportunity. Mm-hmm. And I think that's really a challenge for people that are, if you've never had a company before and you've always worked a job mentality, see, at a job, you just show up and they pay you. With your own business, you've got to show up for yourself before they pay you so that they pay you and you make more money. And so
right.
There's a really good book called The 1 Minute Millionaire. And a lot of these books have a lot of great concepts. The book is by, Mark Victor Hansen. But in chapter 4, I used to always refer to chapter 4 because it was my favorite chapter, and it was called Be, Do, Have. And so you've got to be the person that you want to become. You've got to step into your future, and then you've got to take the action, and you've got to consistently do it. And then eventually you'll have what it is that you planned out to go towards. But if you wait until you have it in order to be it and in order to, accomplish it, you're going to be waiting a really long time. So it's a very backwards situation where, when you have a job, a lot of times it's like, well, you pay me and I'll show up. And there's another really, one of my favorite books is The Science of Getting Rich. And it says, no matter what you do or how you do it, you got to show up all the time. You got to be present with all your might, all your mind, all your will. And then other opportunities happen. But if you show up half empty, you don't bring value to people, whether you have a job or whether you're in a business or whether you're in a partnership. With my clients, my biggest goal is to give them so much more value than what they're paying me. And it makes it this relationship that has so much glue that my clients stay with me for 3, 4, 5 years, and they refer people to me. And sometimes they probably ask me to do a little bit too much for what they're paying me, but I feel like I'm serving them. And by me serving them, then other opportunities happen.
Right.
So that's a book that I would recommend that people, read. And the whole fear thing is, so many people are afraid. You look at what's happening right now with COVID and the news. And I mean, let's face it, there's a lot of stuff going on in the world. And so you could be in any kind of business right now, and you could say to yourself, geez, look at what's happening with COVID. I don't really know what's happening with my company. Or you could be looking at this as an opportunity to innovate yourself and to evolve. And some of the companies that I work with, they've had to change their model. Maybe they had 15, 18 showrooms, and now they're doing virtual tours, over the phone. And before, maybe they were doing door to door, and now they're calling me because they want to spend $20,000 a month on ads to like drive more people to their website. So famous saying I heard, I think it's by Ray Kroc from McDonald's. I looked it up the other day because when I was in Australia, I heard this phrase that just made so much sense. And the phrase was, when you're green, you're growing, and when you're ripe, you're rotten. And I was talking to someone yesterday who is involved in charities all over the world. They're developing a cryptocurrency that's going to be about the same value as gold. And, he was asking me to help his company with some branding and marketing and SEO and developing like some of the brand. And, I said something over the phone to him. I said, even though I do this for all these companies, I don't claim to know everything. I feel like I'm always learning, especially in this lifetime with digital and Google. And, it's like Google changes all the time, and that's the industry that I'm in. So if I tell a client I got to figure it out, I think I'm probably lying to myself, because a lot of times for me doing marketing, it's more like a chemistry experiment. And that chemistry experiment, it happens every month for me. Like I find new little treasures and I help people grow their company. But you've got to be adaptable in this time with what's happening in the world and also where things are going. I mean, look at, I just heard last week, like Kodak, I didn't even know they were still around, is now in the medical and pharmaceutical. They're working on vaccines, but before that they were in the camera business, right?
Yeah.
So
yeah.
You look at like Walmart. I bought some stock a couple weeks ago in Walmart. They just partnered up with Shopify, and they're going to offer a membership just like Amazon. And it only makes sense. You look at companies like Netflix, or you look at companies like Tesla that are ahead of their time. I mean, I've never seen anything in the last 50 years where our government or NASA has launched a rocket and able to land all the pieces back into the same, portal. They usually break up in the atmosphere, and then where does it go, right? So it's kind of like yesterday, I was talking to somebody, and we were talking about the science of getting rich, and in there they talk about the Wright brothers going, hey, we're going to fly these things in the air, and people thought they were nuts.
Yeah, that's a great book. That's a great book.
And like, who would have thought, that things were possible? And that's, you really have to tap into your kind of inner belief and go, what do I want to create in my life? Because anything is possible if you believe it, and if you set out the intention, and you don't get knocked out of the box by some opinion from someone that, their opinion changes 3 months from now. And that's how most people are. Their opinion lasts for about a week or two, and then 2 weeks later they have a different opinion.
You brought up Blockbuster early in the conversation. How you they're one of your big clients, and Blockbuster, they were huge. They were on every. I mean, they were almost on every corner.
Right.
They had Blockbuster Video, then they had Blockbuster Music, which I worked for Blockbuster Music for a while.
Oh,
but the reason why I brought that up is because they had such an opportunity to own the entertainment market. They had an opportunity to do the kiosks, do all those things. They decided to just stand their ground and stay with the brick and mortar. Right. And Redbox blew them out of the water. And then Netflix blew them even further out of the water. So now they're completely shut down. And because they weren't willing to think outside the box. And so that brings me up to the next part. When you talk about belief, do you, what is how does somebody know what the ceiling of their belief is? How far do they go with their belief? You understand what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So what do you think about that?
I think when it comes to the ceiling of your belief, right? It's like when you're a business owner, you can imagine, making a couple $100,000 a year.
Right.
And then you have to imagine making a couple million a year. And then you have to imagine making, a couple $100 million a year. Yep. And so your belief is like the ceiling. I think it was a John C. Maxwell book that I read that talked about the law of the lid. And as a business owner or somebody that's self-employed, you can only grow as much as you believe you can grow. And if you're not working on yourself, your income's probably not going up either, right? So most of the most successful people that I know that are making millions of dollars, they work on themselves. They have a budget where they take trips and they reflect, or they, go to yoga retreats, or they travel to Costa Rica. They make sure that they have certain things that are scheduled in their life that grow them, right? Whether you're in a certain industry and going to events, like I know right now with COVID, a lot of people aren't going to events, but right now there's a lot of Zoom meetings going on, like in the entertainment business. There might not be a lot of filming, but I have a friend that's a producer. He sold a script to Will Ferrell a couple of years ago. And he said, man, it's been the busiest time ever because people are taking advantage of these Zoom meetings and they're developing all sorts of projects because now people are at home. They have more flexibility and they're getting creative. So, the belief level that you have, I call it like a blueprint, right? So like if you grow up, and I see this all the time. I see people, maybe their mom and their dad didn't have a lot of money and they had certain characteristic or traits. Like maybe they would complain about something that's $10, and just like spend all this energy over this $10 item that costs them more than $10, right? So we have these belief levels within our family that we're conditioned with. And the question is, for the people that are watching, is how do you open up your belief level to a new ceiling, right? So, I mean, here in LA, things are kind of expensive. I mean, I could go out for lunch and spend $20, and I know people that would rather probably go to McDonald's because it's $2, right? So you have to ask yourself, where's the value in life, right? Like even with food, like my wife is in the food business and she sells like vegan organic food. And a lot of people go, well, that's kind of expensive, whatever, it's $6, $7 for a cashew cheesecake, or, maybe it's $10 for a cauliflower pizza. But if you look at like people saving money and eating junk, it's cheap today because a lot of us live in this microwave mentality. We're trying to get the dollar today. We're trying to save money today. And then we don't realize how much that's going to cost us later on when it comes to our health, going to the doctor. I mean, if you end up in the hospital because you're eating bad food for 10 years, that costs a hell of a lot more than what you saved.
Yeah.
Because health, if you don't have your health, and these are just a few examples, but you've got to think outside the box. And, maybe for the person that's watching, hey, maybe you're starting with a shoestring budget. You can get creative, but try to grow. To me, money is like energy. So a lot of times if you put out more energy, you usually get more of a return if it's calculated. And sometimes as a business owner, it's scary, right? Like, oh, hey, I'm going to put out $3-4 grand a month for advertising. Maybe it's ads on the internet. That's scary for a lot of people. I mean, I talked to a real estate guy yesterday. You want to spend $500 to $1,000, but here's a guy that wants to make $300-400K a year. So you have to look at everything like a business, right? Like, how are you going to make $400K if you're only spending $500 a month? It's like you're probably not going to get good quality leads, and you might get a lot of riffraff. So you have to really ask yourself, like, are you thinking from abundance or are you thinking from scarcity? Because whatever you focus on is what you're going to create. Like I said, your mind is a magnet. So if you're thinking, I don't have enough, then you'll attract not enough. And if you think abundantly, then you'll get, abundance back. Some of the clients that I get, I don't even get any money from them, and I'm already working for them, like giving them value and helping them along because I know it's going to come. I have this faith that like they're not going to have a relationship like that with anybody else. Why not imagine that I'm already in business with them, and then shortly after that I'm in business with them?
Right. I think a lot of people that are not self-employed, people that have not ever done their own business, I think they're they think they have to wait for the exact perfect opportunity to start something. You know, it's very similar to when when you're a young couple and you're waiting for the perfect time to have a baby. I mean, is there ever a perfect time to have a child, you know? Because regardless of your financial status, regardless of what's going on in your life, it's still a time that's going to completely just change everything you're doing. And so the reason why I bring that up is because what you're talking about, even if you just do something on the side, even just something, you have to start it, because that extra $50 a week, that extra $150 a month, that can do a lot for a lot of people. I think they say the average bankruptcy could be 100% eliminated if people just had another $300-400 a month, you know, in the entire household. So, you know, you have to think outside the box, and that's why there's so many opportunities now, and especially with this whole, you know, pandemic going on.
Yeah,
we have all been forced to slow down. We've all been forced to do certain things. And I know that's one of the reasons why, you know, I finally said, we're going to get this podcast started, because no more excuses, you know,
right.
and I've always been somebody who's had multiple irons in the fire. I've always believed in, you've got to have at least 7 or 8 streams of income happening. But I also knew that starting this podcast was going to be something that was going to help individual people. And yeah, does it take time? 100%, but you have to think beyond that, you know?
Yeah, you do.
Right. So this is great information, Hugh, and I appreciate it, because, and I know a lot of people are going to get a lot out of this, because I think a lot of people think that they have to have a bank account full of cash to get something started. When you say you've started something from nothing, I mean, as far as financially, what do you think somebody really needs to have, bare minimum, just in your opinion? You know,
I think your will and your creativity is so important. You know, I'll tell you a story. Like that time when I did, you know, the clown party and I had the entertainment business.
Right.
I had a couple $100, and I came up with this concept. I mean, I don't know. I said, hey, how do I make this happen? Right. So what I started doing was I started booking these parties in advance, and people would send me the deposits. I would say, well, I need a deposit. Right. And then I would take the deposits and I would go and buy costumes. And then when people called me on the phone, I would say, well, we don't have these, or booked up. We have this other one. And what I did was I kind of cash funded my own business with deposits. So I put the money out in the advertising. I did a few parties. The other thing that I did too was I went and called up a bunch of schools and said, hey, can we come and visit the kids for free? We'll come out, we'll do balloons, we'll do a half hour show with some bubbles, right? And I set up probably 30, 40, 50 schools, and then we would come out and we would give out cards. You know, at the end, we'll give out cards. And I got so many parties from that, and that didn't cost me any money. It cost me maybe the cards, some bubbles, some balloons, right? It sounds kind of funny, if someone's in traditional business. The other thing I did too is like, hey, I got to generate business. So I would go out to a park at the time and just make balloons for free, and give people a card and say, if you want to make a donation, I'd walk out of the park in an hour with $100 cash. Because then people, hey, give this guy $1. You know, I was like, you want to give a donation, but I got a bunch of birthday parties from that. The other thing I did was there was a party store that was here in LA. It was called Vine America. And I got some flyers chopped. They weren't even business cards, but I said, hey, would you guys do me a favor? Because I buy all my supplies here. Would you give these out? And they put one in every bag for their customers. And that didn't cost me any money either. Right.
Yeah.
And so here I am, I'm busy doing like 15, 20 parties a week between referrals, between the school visits. You know, I did this clown for a music video. I didn't know who the music video was for. They just called me up and booked me. Right. So here I'm at the music video and I'm entertaining 2 kids, and one's 2 and one's 4. I mean, what am I doing to entertain them? Right. Like some parachute games, stuff like that. And the little kid lost his, he had like a little plastic figurine. I bet it was probably worth like 2 cents. And he was crying. And I mailed it. What happened was the kid was so upset he had a meltdown, right? He couldn't find his little plastic giraffe. So I get home and I find it and I mail it back to the production company. And that music video was for Anthony Sabato Jr. and Will Smith. It was a music video they did together. And then next thing you know, I'm working on a haunted house for Will and Jada Pinkett Smith that ends up in People magazine, where we're constructing like swings from the trees. And it's a 5-figure, party, which means, they're paying a bunch of money. And we created all these things. We created these rooms with dots on the walls with iridescent lights. We did this whole thing. But you take $100 party and now you have a 5-figure party. What's the difference? The difference is the value. And I was so into what I was doing. It didn't matter if it was $100 or thousands of dollars. But everything I did that had that same kind of mentality, like give it my all, no matter what it is, would multiply the efforts. And then next thing you know, I'm getting calls I got a call from Stephen King, to do something on Rose Red and In Sync with Justin Timberlake. And at the time, I was a yes guy. People call me, I would just say yes.
Yeah.
And then I'd make it happen.
Well, of course. I mean, everybody wants to be a clown for Stephen King, of course. Right?
I actually did domino toppling because when I was younger, I worked on a mural on the QE2, and we learned how to scale up. Like if you're doing a painting, you kind of split it in fractions, and then you can like make the painting bigger.
Right.
So somebody called me and they said, hey, we need someone to do domino toppling for an In Sync video with Justin Timberlake. And I said, yeah, I can do it. And they said, sketch over, some dominoes, give us some ideas and fax it to us. So I faxed it over. No other agency wanted to touch it. They didn't do dominoes, but I was like, I can do that. So I ended up working on that. Then I worked on Stephen King, where they flew me up to Seattle and gave me like a per diem and a rental car, where I worked on Rose Red. And then I worked on Mary-Kate and Ashley Olsen. But you got to look at my ingenuity, like with my creativity. It's like, there's another really good book for those people out there. I'm big on some of these things because I've learned from them, and they've also reminded me of things in my life that I've done that I could like put into a story. There's a really good book called The Surrender Experiment, and it's by Michael Singer, and he writes another book called The Untethered Soul. But in this surrender experiment, the guy starts off, he wants to do some yoga and get some land up in the mountains and just be left alone. And he starts talking to himself and he goes, you know what? My little voice in my head has so much to say all the time. I'm not going to listen to the voice in my head. I'm just going to say yes, no matter what it is. So the guy starts with teaching some classes. Someone comes to him, they say, hey, would you help with these seminars? He says yes. He builds his own house out of second-rate wood, and the police pull up, and they say, who built this house? And he's like, well, me. And he thought he was in trouble. And they said, well, could you build an addition on my home? So the guy's like, all right, I'll do it. So by the end of this book, he ends up having 3 or 4 different construction companies. He has a temple where they do yoga retreats, and he ends up selling this computer technology company for something like $1.3 billion.
Wow.
But he never prejudged people that came to him. He just said, yeah, I can do that. And he just he thought, things are probably being dropped in my path for a reason. And so I'm just going to open myself up to receive. And he would just say yes. And for some of the people out there that are listening, you might have some way in your mind that you think things are supposed to show up. You might think it's got to be perfect before you start. You might think you need to have a certain amount of money before you start. And all those things are going to create resistance in you just doing it. Mm-hmm. And sometimes you could get asked to an event that has nothing to do with your business, and you're so thankful that you went there because you weren't looking for something and something presented itself. And that might become the biggest blessing. So I think when you ask me creating something from nothing, I took a course at Landmark Forum. It's a big, personal development course. It's about getting your past out of your future. And the biggest concept was if you have your head filled with a whole bunch of stuff, there's no room. It's kind of like if you had like a trash can and you just filled it with all this stuff,
Mm-hmm.
and you can't put anything else in there. And let's just say you tell people, hey, I'm going to give you, I don't know, 10 ounces of solid gold, but your trash can is filled with trash.
Right.
Where are you going to put the gold?
Right.
So in a way, you almost have to, there's a lot of things I'll mention. I talked to somebody in India, and they're very spiritual, and we were talking about evolution and kind of enlightenment. And they said, the biggest key in life to evolve is to unlearn what you've learned so that you're open to like evolving, because most people, by the time they become, either your age, Sean, or my age, they hold on to all these things that they think they know, and they have no room left to kind of grow or go in any other direction. So
Yeah.
I think you've got to have this enthusiastic, childlike mentality where you're going to play, you're going to create a game from this on how to make money, and then you're going to figure out the puzzle. And listen, if it goes one way, if it goes another way, you got to roll with the punches and ask, like, how can I make something out of this?
Yeah.
Instead of, Sean was right. He said I wasn't going to,
Right.
do this.
Well, that's the thing. I mean, this very topic can bring up so many other things, and that's the beautiful part about what I love about being an entrepreneur. And I've always been the yes guy when I was building my business. When we first started our event business, I borrowed $2,500 from my mom, and I paid her back as I started DJing events. And in a short period of time, we're doing 50, 60 weddings a year, and we're making six figures just DJing parties, And
Yeah.
then, of course, we expanded into a full-service event business and everything else. And I never had, a bank full of cash when I, started something. And I haven't always been the winner, but I've always allowed every door to open and walk through it. And so that's a huge point.
Right.
There's so many different things we could talk about. And naturally, we're going to have you on in the future to talk about other topics. But, bottom line is you started a clown business that made you a lot of money. And you,
Yeah, I know.
maybe started with $100,
money.
$200? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Right. I mean, and so that just says to anybody that's paying attention to what we're doing here at Certifiably Unemployable, that you 100% can do it as well. So based on this topic, Hugh, do you have any final thoughts?
No, I mean, for the people that are listening out there, you've got to believe in yourself. I send you like a little bio. It's when I was 4, my dad passed away. Like I was raised by, my mom. I was the oldest of 3 boys. She had 3 boys she had to raise on her own. There's 1,000,001 excuses that I could have came up with why I'm not successful or why I can't do it. I mean, I was not born into money, but listen, I know people with 2 doctorate degrees where I'm making 5 or 6 times more than they are. And it's not really what you know or what you have. It's what you do with things, and it's about being grateful and about seeing the opportunity in things, because there's 2 sides to every coin. And, even to this day, I'm like so grateful. I look at some of the things I've created, and I'm, it's exciting for me because, you can see so many different opportunities out there, whether it's for your own company to grow or expand or whatever. But, anybody can start their own business. I mean, we all hear stories about, Bill Gates starting his business in the garage, or, it's like a lot of the people. I just heard something else today. I was listening to Gary Vee, and he was talking about the education system is outdated. Yeah. And I so agreed with it. He's like, yeah, Amazon's hiring people, but they're not requiring a college degree. So don't set up so many hoops for yourself in life to stop yourself from doing what it is that you should be doing. If you believe in it, it's like when I was in Jamaica, I said, I'm just going to jump off the cliff. I don't know when I'll be here again. I might as well jump off the cliff and jump into the water and have a good time. And sometimes you just got to jump off, and the net will appear. I mean, we're, in this human community that we have, we're all humans. We've all been through it. There's so many successful people that you guys can reach out to get advice from. I see it all the time. I see people work so hard. And I'm like, hey, why don't you just pick up the phone and call somebody and ask advice? And they go, well, they're not going to give me advice like for free. I'm like, what are you talking about? Most successful people love helping other people.
Right.
And so,
that's it.
With that, it reminds me of another guy I had a meeting with. He had a book called Ask and It Will Succeed. He was a success coach. And you've just got to ask for what you want. And most people that are listening, the belief takes over and we don't really ask ourselves, what do we truly want? And what's that plan? Because we're so busy being busy, we never get into the plan.
Right.
And so make the time now with what's happening in the world. Chart something out on, I don't know, take out a piece of paper and some crayons or something, or, draw, get your brain going and start dreaming.
Yep.
And believe in yourself. So that's my final thoughts. If you guys have watched this, reach out and send some questions in. We're happy to cover anything, on the following podcasts and the live streams that we do. We would love to help people make a difference in your life. We'd love for you guys to turn around and say, hey, I watched Sean and Hugh talk about this, and it sparked a chord, and I got my stuff flowing. And 2 years later, they come to us and go, hey, we started this business. We listened to the podcast or the live stream, and
that's what it's all about. That's what it's all about right there. Yep.
Absolutely.
Well, Hugh, I appreciate it. So at what point in your life do you think you officially became certifiably unemployable?
I mean, I would say when I started the event planning company and I saw what was possible.
Yeah.
And
I mean, when you're making a few grand a weekend, you're like, do I need to go work anywhere else? I mean,
yeah, I'm not just saying this. I'm not trying to brag or anything. I mean, I have people that call me every other month and they offer me 6 figures to work in a box in their office. And I'm like, hey, one of my clients, I could make more than working, with you.
Mm-hmm.
And
it's not always about the money. It's not always about the paycheck. I mean, You're going to sit in a box and be super unhappy. Yeah, you're providing for your family. You're doing well, but you're not happy. And,
right.
and that's one of the things that I tell my son and the younger generation all the time is that, listen, you've got to do what makes you happy, but what you can't do is wait for the right opportunity. Just go for it, like you're saying, And that I think is the biggest message that I'm taking away from this today. And I know I'm going to go back and listen to it and everything multiple times. And so, Hugh, I really do appreciate your time very, very much.
Thank you. No, I appreciate you having me on. And hey, if one thing we said makes a difference, it's totally worth it.
Yep.
And I hope the people that are listening, you really got to dig inside yourself, because I know, it's tough this day and age. People are bombarded with social media. It can look depressing. It can look like, there's no hope, but you've got to start something. If that's what you want to do, follow your heart, and go after it.
Well, we all have control over what we want to have in our lives. If something is negative on Facebook, then get rid of it. If something's negative on Instagram and it bothers you, then get rid of it.
Right.
Sometimes you got to take that inventory of yourself, and you can't help anybody until you get yourself right. So I totally agree with that. So.
Yeah, exactly.
All right, so we appreciate you again, Hugh, and of course we're going to have you on in the future. So Certifiably Unemployable, don't forget to like us on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and you can hear our podcasts on multiple feeds, including Spotify, Anchor, as well as Apple. And until next time.
You've been listening to Certifiably Unemployable. Ready to fire the boss yet? You're on your way. Sean has been self-employed for over 20 years. So if that's something that you want to do, something you've been dreaming about for years, Sean has all the knowledge, good, bad, and indifferent. We hope you've gotten some useful and practical information from this show. And we'll be back soon. But in the meantime, hook up with us on Facebook and Instagram at Certifiably Unemployable. Find us on YouTube and at www.certifiablyunemployable.com. Till next time, this is Certifiably Unemployable, signing off.